You know, there's a common myth in our society that you can teach somebody to be homosexual. I don't believe it. The reason I don't believe it is because we have so much evidence from around the world that you cannot teach people to be homosexual any more than you can teach them to be heterosexual. Why is this? It's because people have a desire. They know what their desires are. Most people are not confused about their desires. They're pretty clear what they are. Where does that desire come from? If you ask people questions, in other cultures and in our culture, they say time and time again, that's what I felt since I was really small. Since I was 2, 3, 4 years old. Where does it come from? Is it the genes? Is it the brain? Is it their gonads? Something powerful inside of them is producing the most powerful attraction. They don't learn it, and some of them wish they could dislearn it, and they're equally as unsuccessful in unlearning it as they are in learning it.
A lot of the people who have only wanted to have sex with people of their same sex probably were born with a very strong tendency to be that way, and that's supported by the fact that the numbers look so similar regardless of culture, which means that no matter how children are brought up, the same number of people in every single culture, more or less, have this pattern of behavior.
There are currently 3 different lines of evidence that suggest that a person's sexual orientation is at least partially genetically determined. The first line of evidence comes from twin studies, which show that identical twins are very likely to have the same sexual orientation. The second line of evidence comes from extended family studies, showing that quite distant relatives often share the same sexual orientation. And I think that the most compelling evidence comes from studies in our own laboratory, which look directly at people's DNA, directly at the genes, and which show that people that are gay have a tendency to inherit one type of gene and people that are heterosexual another. Once those genes are isolated and once these results, like any scientific results, are extended and confirmed, I think it will provide truly compelling evidence that sexual orientation is, at least in part, determined not when a person is 20 or when a person is 10, or not even when a person is 1 year old, but when they're conceived, because that's when we inherit our genes.
I studied the brains of 41 people at autopsy, looking for differences between straight and gay people. Now, of course, we know there are differences between the brains of men and women on average. There are certain parts of the brain that are bigger in men than women, and certain parts that are bigger in women than men. And there's one particular part of the brain that we've been especially interested in. It's called the hypothalamus. It's actually this region here at the base of the brain. It's involved in the regulation of sexual drive and other instinctive behaviors. So if there's a part of the brain that's responsible for our sexual attractions, then it should be similar between most women and gay men. And that's what we find in this part of the brain where our sexual feelings are generated.
We used to think that homosexuality was psychological. Now we think there are biological factors involved, but either way, it's very difficult for a person to change. People ask about changing. They ask about, can a homosexual change their orientation? And you have, again, you have to define that. Human beings are extremely flexible animals. We can go up into space, we fly in the sky, we live under the water. We do amazing things that no other animal does. And a human being can live their life differently than the way they feel. We have people who we send as spies to other countries, and they live their whole life pretending to be a Russian or a Persian or something else when they really aren't. They're really from, you know, Minnesota. And it's the same thing. There are some homosexual people who so strongly want to live a heterosexual lifestyle, because it's a lot easier, that they can play act like an actor their lives as heterosexual. However, most cannot do that, and the outcome is depression or suicide for most people who have to live their whole lives pretending to be somebody that they're not.
It's particularly important for an adolescent, if he comes for help, to help him recognize if he is in fact homosexual, that he is. Because he's had fantasies from his childhood, because he has these sexual drives that are very powerful, and not to drive him into having sex with women, which can make him feel passionless, can make him feel sick, and make him feel like that never in his life is he ever going to be able to experience love or passion for another. That is devastating for an adolescent.